His study found that people who view 47 more favorably score higher on measures of psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. I didn't need someone to tell me that his supporters are scheming, manipulative, unscrupulous, aggressive, impulsive, selfish, entitled, self-centered, lack empathy. But it's nice to see that a peer-reviewed study agrees with me. The study says that these traits tend to reflect tendencies to exploit or disregard others. It also indicates lower empathy. It says that some may even enjoy the suffering of others. And if you're about to comment about how you supported 47 and this doesn't describe you, relax. This is not to suggest that persons are either good or bad. The empirical evidence documents that malevolent and benevolent dispositions are dimensional in nature. Thus, these dispositions reflect continuums, with some persons inclined to be more caring and others to be more calloused, some more selfless and others more selfish, with many gradations in between. I know that if I were in your shoes, I'd be butthurt too. But I'm just talking about an interesting study that came out, what it looked at, what it found out, and what it all could mean. No judgment. Well, maybe a little. As always, my resources, they're linked in the video description. There's two main concepts in this study. First is malevolent dispositions. The second is benevolent dispositions. The indicators for malevolent disposition are psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. The people who scored high in these traits, they tend to be more manipulative, less empathetic, and more self-serving. Whereas those with benevolent dispositions, these are the people with empathy, compassion, pro-social attitudes. The people who are high in these traits, they're more likely to engage in cooperative and altruistic behaviors. They're less attracted to hardline or exclusionary political positions. And the way they gathered the information for these studies were through blind surveys. There were two sets of surveys, and they were with US adults, and they used standardized psychological scales, and they used statistical modeling to come up with their conclusions. And they linked personality profiles to political ideology. So what they found is the correlation with conservatism. The evidence showed that there was statistical significance with association between higher levels of malevolent traits and stronger conservative attitudes, especially in this current political climate, and especially amongst Trump supporters. They also found that there's a role of personality in politics, and that was built on existing research, showing that personality factors can actually predict political behavior, including how you participate, how much you trust, and your attitudes towards democracy. So that's a huge implication. Your politics are possibly based on your personality. Now, how did they come up with these surveys? How did they collect all this information? They did two surveys of US adults. The first survey was men only, and it was a mix of white men and minorities, and it was a group of 1,000 people. And the second survey was 8,000 people. It was a mix of men and women, and it was anonymous surveys. They looked at personality traits, your beliefs about 47, your political beliefs in general, your general attitudes, and throughout the survey, they were doing attention checks just to make sure that you were actually paying attention to the questions being asked, as opposed to just checking anything. The study used these recognized and scientifically validated sets of questions. Those are called scales, and they measured things like your social dominance orientation, and that's asking whether you believe some people or groups should dominate others. It measured your views on right-wing authoritarianism and your preference for order, conformity, and authority. It measured your psychopathic or malevolent traits, such as lack of empathy or tendency to manipulate other people. It also measured your benevolent traits and things like kindness and compassion, and it checked on your empathy levels. With the statistical modeling, they used some technique I'm not familiar with, but it lets researchers see how different traits and attitudes are connected. Instead of looking at each thing as a separate thing, it helps someone show how personality and ideology might be linked together. And then they did group comparison. They compared different groups within the surveys, such as white versus minority men and men versus women. to see if links between personality and politics were stronger or weaker between different groups. And then the study tested if being a minority or being a certain gender changed how personality traits predicted political views. And that helped to see if certain patterns are only true for some groups as opposed to others. And then they did some follow up testing to make sure that the results they had were actually robust. What it found was that people who scored higher on personality traits like callousness, manipulativeness, psychopathy, and narcissism are more likely to identify as politically conservative and hold favorable views towards 47. These people scored lower on effective empathy as well. They scored low for having concern for others' suffering, and they were more likely to experience indifference or enjoyment towards other people's suffering. The differences amongst the groups, among men, the link between malevolent traits and conservatism was really strong. Amongst women, the study showed that women just tended to have higher rates of benevolence overall, and it also showed in their political leanings. There were things that weren't explained in the study. They didn't talk really about age, education, income, and what their actual minority status is. The thing about the study that got me is that 47 supporters were able to recognize the emotions and feelings of other people. They just didn't care about those other people's feelings. I know a lot of people who are trying to convince people who have shown a lack of empathy to be more empathetic to others, but that's not how we need to talk to them. We need to focus on what we would consider selfish to get through to them. If you're truly trying to get them to support the right thing, appeal to what they want, the things that they want to improve their lives, because their focus is them and the people around them as opposed to everyone else, whereas you may be focused on the health and well-being of everybody. So if we can all look inside and change the way that we talk to these people, because they're everywhere. I'm looking at the farmers in Arkansas who will most likely lose their farms, and it'll get sold to the people who they voted for, and they'll end up working those farms nonetheless. And I look at the the flooding that happened in Texas last month, and it's just all of these things where the expectation is those of us who are empathetic to give empathy to these people rather than telling them, this is what you asked for and now you have it, but you're complaining. We have to find a way to talk to these people in a way that they understand. So if it's with concerns to climate, maybe instead of saying this crisis, rather, let's preserve this history and this heritage that you're used to. Don't you want to go to your favorite fishing hole? Have you been to this place before? It's not going to be there if we allow these people to continue to do what they're doing. When you talk to these people, you want to discuss shared goals. You find the common interest that you can talk about. You want safer neighborhoods. Do you feel safer now that these frozen people are everywhere? Or do you have concern that somebody in your family who looks a little bit different might get snatched up? Or that lady in your church who is a good person, what if she gets taken one day? Say you like good schools too, and this is what we want to do about it. Should your child have to carry that 10-pound backpack with the bulletproof shield in it? You can talk about job opportunities and how with everything that's happening, the jobs are less and less. Don't we want good job opportunities now? And the price of electricity keeps going up, and maybe the solar doesn't produce as much as you want it to, but does it hurt to have it if it's producing at all? Anything to lower our price of electricity, because our electric bills are almost as much as the mortgage if you're blessed enough to have a mortgage. And if you're renting, most assuredly, the cost of electricity probably costs more than your rent. For these people who are less swayed by empathy, you want to appeal to fairness and tradition and order. So you would frame an environmental issue in terms of protecting America's heritage. Right? We have to find ways to reframe everything. And I want you guys to come up with some ideas and put it in the comments for me so that we can brainstorm together. Anyway, the events this week probably activated or deactivated your empathy. And wherever you fall on the spectrum, it's okay. Just know that it is a spectrum, and the most empathetic person can lose their empathy in specific moments.
It makes sense if you don't feel a deep well of empathy for someone who made a career out of refusing to show it for others. I want to normalize that, because sometimes when a public figure dies, especially in a tragic way, people rush to say, you have to be compassionate right now, don't speak ill of the dead. But if that person spent their life dismissing other people's pain, mocking it, minimizing it, even actively contributing to it, it makes sense that your empathy tank might run dry. That doesn't mean you're celebrating. It doesn't mean you're cold-hearted. It just means your compassion has limits. And those limits are often shaped by how much compassion someone showed in their lifetime. There's actually something psychologically healthy about noticing that boundary. You're not obligated to manufacture sorrow for someone who never extended any to you, your community, or people you care about. You can hold both, I don't wish this on anyone, and I don't feel sad about it either. That's not cruelty, that's honesty. And it feels really weird and uncomfortable to hold both of those in your body at the same time. This isn't about telling you not to be compassionate. It's about giving you permission to notice whatever you honestly feel or don't feel and trust that it's valid.
Anyway, I'll see you on Monday. If you want to see a video that you probably have missed, somehow my channel keeps growing, but my views they're just minuscule. Anyway, if you've missed this, watch this video next. If you haven't subscribed, please do so here, and I'll see you on Monday. All right, take care, bye.